This here is Driveclub running on PC at 60 FPS, and this feels so weird, dude. In a previous video, I've already shown what is currently possible with PlayStation 4 Emulation, and obviously I couldn't help myself from trying it myself, and it feels incredible, honestly, to actually see this game run at 60 FPS and also using some tweaks to improve the resolution a little bit. This is genuinely the best Driveclub has ever looked and felt. We also got all the DLCs enabled this time around, which I never was able to check out because I was unfortunately a little bit late to this game. This is genuinely exactly what I wanted out of a Driveclub experience. And this video, I just kind of wanted to show this off a little bit more in detail, although I've already made a video on this topic, as well as showing some other emulators and games currently in development. I wanted to really give a specific look at this game in particular. I think we had a little hitch there, okay? It's not perfect, as we can see. And we're gonna see that it is still not perfect 100% as we get into it. But just the fact that this is playable feels so bizarre to me. Like, it feels like it hasn't even been that long since PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 emulation has really kicked off. It feels like only within the last 5 years it became really viable to use PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 emulators as a genuine replacement for those consoles. And even then, it still really depends on the game. Like, some games you're still better off playing on the original console, such as, for example, Gran Turismo 6. It feels illegal to play Driveclub on a PC like this. And it just works, which is incredible. I wanted to talk a little bit more about this game and explore some of the content that I wasn't really able to check out before with all the DLC, as well as some online exclusive content, because there were some, well, cars that you could only earn through progressing through the ranks and clubs and doing other online multiplayer related stuff that honestly is completely inaccessible nowadays, even if you did buy the DLC back in the day. At the end of the video, I will also try to give a setup tutorial to show you guys how to set this up yourself. But yeah, Driveclub, here it is, in all its glory, in all its beauty. I'm also uploading, this is gonna be the first video I will upload in 1440p to really just show you guys how good this game still looks to this day. So the main career of Driveclub, I will be honest, was nothing super special. It is a very, very simple career mode. Like, the Driveclub tour you can see in the top left there was pretty much the base game. And if you only bought the base game, especially after the game was taken offline, this was basically all you had. So pretty much for every single event you could earn 3 stars, I think up to 3 stars per race. So you can see some events have more stars. It's probably because there's more races like in an event basically. But this was basically the entire game. And what was it, like around 225 stars was the absolute maximum you could achieve. So this kind of results in like a little bit over 60 races throughout the entire main career mode, which I was able to finish very, very quickly. And like, I thought it was okay. I think obviously the point of Driveclub was, first of all, the immersion, which is the drive part of Driveclub, but then also the club and online aspect. So the main single player career portion was... it was fairly brave, you know, it was just kind of meant to be an introduction to the rest of the game. However, if you did get all of the DLCs back in the day, you could see that the total amount of stars you could earn here are 1,134. So that's roughly 4 to 5 times as much content as you can see here. This is all new stuff. So this is all new cars, new locations, new events. And none of this stuff is accessible anymore. Even if you want to like buy the game legitimately, like a used copy, you want to buy it online, this stuff is not accessible anymore because this stuff was only ever available digitally. And this is like a huge plus when it comes to emulation because it makes it so much easier to now still access all of this content to this day. And I will absolutely do a couple of streams where I check some of this stuff out because I'm really curious to see what is in here. And it's not even just the events, but also the cars. So as you can see, like a lot of the cars that I have already unlocked are actually DLC cars. And you can just see how many of the DLC cars there were. It's actually absolutely insane. Like, you have cars like the Jaguar XJ220, which was DLC exclusive. And so much other cool stuff that I think really expands the car list of this game. And makes this genuinely one of the coolest car lists I have seen in a very long time. And so here we have a little bit of a stress test when it comes to the emulation. And it seems like the game can hold 30 FPS quite well. Now keep in mind what you're still seeing is 60 FPS because we're using frame generation to just kind of smooth out the frames a little bit. There are times where it can dip slightly below 30 FPS, but it usually, if your system allows for it, actually remains at 30 FPS quite consistently. Now there does exist a 60 FPS patch, however, currently the optimization is not quite good enough to really hit the 60 FPS consistently. So depending on what you're doing, you might be fluctuating between 30 and 60 all the time. And so I like to use frame generation as a tool to just kind of like smooth things over and at least keep the frames over 60, even if there are some issues with that, of course. I do think this is still an improvement overall. But other than that, the emulation is as good as flawless, I want to say. So I've played for a little bit and I didn't encounter any crashes or freezes yet, which is definitely huge. So the stability seems to be surprisingly good. Now there are still some slight minor visual issues, although this looks absolutely spotless. There are still some occasions, I'm not sure if I can show this off, where the shadow behind the car will just kind of look a little bit strange. Which isn't too big of a deal. You'll mostly not really notice it when you're just driving fast and staying in the middle of the road. And there are some very specific roadside objects that can kind of glitch out. You've probably seen it in the very beginning when I started this race. But for the most part, this is just how I remember the game looking. And it looks just as good as I remember it. And even when we're doing a bit of a stress test here, like we have snow weather, for example, a bunch of cars on the track, a full-on race, the base frame rate is very, very consistent. Like we're actually staying at 30 FPS pretty much all the time here, which is... it's honestly just incredible. So I would assume that at this point, you could probably play through the entire career mode and its DLC on an emulator and get pretty much the exact same experience, if not a better experience, than on a original PlayStation. The only caveat with that obviously being that you will need a fairly powerful PC to run this on. So for example, my system here, I'm using a Ryzen 7 7700X, which is a pretty beefy CPU, and a 5070 Ti NVIDIA RTX GPU, which is a brand new GPU that just came out a couple months ago. So I'm using a very, very powerful system. Yeah, this is the graphical glitches I was talking about earlier, by the way. Ow. Can I show this off? Okay. I am not sure what exactly this is. I did notice this only really appears near the start and end of a race. But yeah, this is like the only blatant visual issue I could see. These like tweaking out objects there. But as far as the performance goes, I do have a fairly high-end setup. But as you can see, I'm only ever using like between 30 and 40% of both my GPU and CPU. As with most emulation, this is mostly CPU heavy. So you are most likely going to be CPU limited on an average gaming computer. So keep that in mind. If you have a fairly weak CPU, you might run into issues. But I would say that any higher mid-range PC should be able to run this at least 30 FPS. Now initially with this emulator, really the only thing that looked right was the nighttime. If you try to play anything during the day, especially with weather, it would usually look pretty bad. These days anything works. Like it doesn't really matter what track you're on, it doesn't matter what type of weather you have, what type of day it is. All of it looks like it should, which I think is a huge deal. And I've been really enjoying this game yet again. I think the 60 FPS is such a blessing for this game, and especially in cases where you might actually hit higher frame rates natively through the 60 FPS patch. With the help of frame generation, you could technically run the game at up to 240 FPS, which is absolutely bananas, and you're probably only ever gonna see that in the menus. However, the menus do look incredibly smooth as well on higher frame rates, and it's just generally such a more pleasant experience. Now, I don't think the 30 FPS limitation was ever anything that held the game back all that much, because the game did a really good job of masking its lower frame rate. Like, the motion blur was very heavy in this game, and also something about the camera shake really still made this game feel relatively smooth despite running at 30 FPS. However, obviously higher frame rates for racing games are always desired, and I think having this run at higher frame rates, this is just the go-to way to play the game, for me at least at this point. Especially because it makes the immersive aspect of this game shine so much greater, like, which I think was always like the biggest strength of the game, is just how immersive the driving felt in this game. And at higher frame rates, and I don't want to say higher resolutions because that's one thing you can't really do with this emulator yet. It's to increase the internal resolution. However, with the help of third-party tools, we can make the game at least look sharper on 1440p displays or maybe even 4K displays. It just makes this game feel so much better to play. I feel like it brings the good aspects of this game even more to the forefront, and it's so good, dude. It's so much fun, dude. Unfortunately, the only thing that we're still missing is the online aspect, which was pretty much half what the game was. Like, even with all of the DLC and all of the content and all of the enhancements, at the end of the day, you're still only playing half a game. You can see just how much is great out here. And this will also continue, as you can see here with the multiplayer, just not being available. Now, there is a non-0% chance that all of this will eventually become available again. The PlayStation 3 emulator does actually have functionality for online play. So it is not impossible that at some point down the line, this will become accessible again. However, I think even despite that, I think the experience is never going to be quite the same as back in the day, simply because the player count is obviously going to be much lower. Not every single system will be able to run this game, especially more like lower mid-range PCs will probably have issues running this game in the first place. So it's never going to be quite the same, but I do hope that at some point this emulator will support online play so that we can maybe experience the online aspect of this game again, which would be awesome. And Driveclub also had a bike expansion, which was like its own complete entire thing. Like, you can see just how many bikes there are in this game. Like, I don't think I've ever seen like, there's plenty of games that do cars and bikes. Like, Midnight Club is obviously like the main one, but also Project Gotham Racing. But I think this game really expanded the bike aspect the most. Now, as far as I understand, cars and bikes can't race on the same track, so it's either car or bike races, which, I mean, I guess it's fine. But there's such a great selection of bikes here that, honestly, I don't think I've ever seen. And I'm really curious to see how these handle. Okay, so first time on a bike in this game. And, well, the first person view is already crazy good. Okay, this is cool. I think this is already kind of rad. This is something that, once again, like, I have never experienced because I only ever was able to play the base game. It feels pretty good, actually. Like, first impressions are more than solid. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not too much of a bike person, but if they are available in a racing game, I'll always happily try them out. And in fact, I would have even go as far to say that bikes are actually more fun to me in the Midnight Club games than all of the cars. So, yeah, it's nice to actually try out some of the bikes in this game and just really get to experience all of the content that this game had on offer with all the DLC content. Can I actually pull off a wheelie here? I'm not sure how this works exactly. Skipped over the... Oh god, okay, I think we're doing it. Okay, I think... You didn't see it, but I definitely did it. Okay. And you can even do a stopper here. And with it. Okay. Oh, this is great. I can't wait to play this a little bit more. One thing I did forget to mention, now that this is playable on a PC emulator, that means we can actually hook third-party software to it, like Reshade. Now, most people don't know how to use Reshade, and if I'm gonna be honest, you don't really need to use it for much. Like, you don't need to, like, apply any of the color filters. Like, the game looks more than good enough as is. The only problem at the moment is still that the game will always still run at 1080p. If you have a 1080p monitor, you're good. Like, you don't actually need to do anything. However, if you have a 1440p or maybe even a 4K monitor, you can use Reshade to just sharpen up the game to make it look a little bit more crisp on the 1440p monitor. And really the only thing I've done here is threw in a sharpening and an anti-aliasing filter to round it off. If I turn these off, the game looks a little bit more soft, a little bit more blurry. And with the sharpening filter, it just makes all of the details with the trees and all the car details, it just makes it pop a little bit more. And the anti-aliasing just kind of rounds it off so it doesn't look as, yeah, as pixelated, I guess. Other than that, I would not touch Reshade. The game looks more than good enough as is. But yeah, just to kind of like sharpen up the game a little bit for higher resolutions, I think it does make the game look a little bit, just a little bit more crisp. So I would definitely recommend that if you plan to play this on a high resolution monitor. And if you are fortunate enough to have an ultra-wide monitor, there is actually ultra-wide support for this as well. So I'm currently playing the game at 21:9, which is my aspect ratio that I have. But you can also increase it to 32:9 if you have a super ultra-wide monitor. And I think there's also a Steam Deck specific resolution, which I think is 16:10. However, I would not expect this game to run all that well on a Steam Deck, but it's there. As you can see, the menus are obviously not made with ultra-wide in mind, so you're gonna have this kind of like weird cutoff here, like as you can see, with the menu borders here. And yeah, as you can see, this is Driveclub running in an ultra-wide resolution. Now, there are a few caveats with this, namely the fact that the game is kind of zoomed in. You can maybe already tell with the cockpit view, but I think with the close chase camera, this is the most obvious. Like, the car is just... It takes up way too much space here. It is way too close to the camera. If you use the far camera, it's kind of fine. However, I'm not sure if I would fully recommend playing at this resolution because since more pixels are being rendered overall, the performance does take a bit of a dip. So you will probably just be playing at the base frame rate of 30 FPS. And even then, I'm not sure what it is, but something about this doesn't feel 100% smooth. So I did turn off frame generation for this just to show things off. However, it is possible. If you really enjoy playing on ultra-wide monitors, it is an option. I think overall I would still prefer the regular 16:9 aspect ratio because you can kind of tell it just works a little bit better. But once again, it's an option, and I think that's cool. And so yeah, I think that covers pretty much everything you have to know about Driveclub and how it's currently running on PC. And first impressions are fantastic. It's so great to actually revisit this game after all this time with all of the new content, not just the DLCs that have been delisted, but also the online exclusive content that you would not have access to otherwise. It seems to run well. I did not run into any crashes or freezes just yet, although keep in mind this might still be an issue down the line. But otherwise, it seems to run great. Like, you can pretty much hit the 30 FPS base frame rate as long as your system allows it. There aren't any major visual glitches, aside from like some smaller stuff that I think is fairly easy to ignore. And honestly, a fair trade-off if you consider that you can now run the game at higher frame rates and not really resolutions, but you can kind of make the game sharper on higher resolutions. So I would say this is absolutely a win, especially because you have to consider that there's always going to be people who will play this game for the first time now that the game is available on an emulator. Like, pretty much any time emulation becomes more accessible and more viable as an alternative to using an actual console, there's going to be people playing certain games for the first time. There's plenty of games on the PlayStation 2 or the Xbox 360 or the PS3 that I only ever played thanks to emulation, and I played for the first time through emulation. And I'm sure this is going to be true for Driveclub as well. Many people will play this game for the first time thanks to this emulator. And I think in some kind of bizarre way, this might be the best quote-unquote new racing game for many people of this year. Like, when I consider what other games are releasing this year, there's some interesting and fun stuff, namely the new Tokyo Extreme Racer. However, I think if I had not played Driveclub yet, and I would play it for the first time on this emulator, I think this might be my favorite racing game that I played this year. So yeah, I absolutely encourage you to check this out if this interests you. If you've never played Driveclub before and you have the PC hardware to run this, go ahead and give it a try. It's such a treat, and you should absolutely play it at least once. Which brings me to how to set this up. So this is not going to be easy. You're gonna have to bring some patience, and I'm gonna go over this somewhat briefly. I'm really bad at explaining things, but I'm gonna try my best. Now, we want to use a very specific version of the PS4 emulator made by Raphael the Great, which is a great name. This is basically a fork, like an alternative version of the PS4 emulator, if you can think about it that way. That has some very specific optimizations for Driveclub specifically that does improve the frame rate by a lot. Now, for this, you need to create an account at GitHub, so do so if you haven't already. And once you're logged in, you want to just scroll down to the artifacts down here. And the one most of you will probably want to download is the second to last one, Win64 QT. This is the one. Now, if you are on Mac or on Linux, you obviously want to pick different ones. But for most people, this is going to be the one they want to use. And just hit the download button right here. Now, we want to launch the emulator here, and it might once again prompt you to set a games archive. Just do the same as before. Create a folder called games, and this is where you want to put the folder of the game and point to the correct file location as well, and then your game should pop up here. Now, before we get into it, we want to actually adjust the settings real quick. You can leave everything as is here. You can enable Discord rich presence if you care. Under user, you can input your name so that it actually gets recognized properly in the game if you want to. But the important one is under the debug tab, which is the last one. You want to make sure that enable readbacks here is enabled. So you make sure that the tick box is ticked here. Hit apply, then save. And then you want to right click on the game and then go to cheats/patches. And then you go to the patches tab. If this is empty, just click download patches here. It doesn't really matter what repository you're downloading from. It should be the same thing. And here's where you're gonna have all of your goodies. So if you want to increase the frame rate to up to 60 FPS internally, you want to hit 60 FPS with delta time. That's the one you want to hit. If you want to play in an ultra-wide aspect ratio, you can also enable it here. You can disable resets or barriers. You can just mess around with this if you want to. Hit save, and then we're almost ready to go. Now, at this point, you can boot the game, and you will notice that it will not start. Like, it will just be hitting a black screen. Boot the game anyways. This is necessary to create certain folders that we will still need for one final step. Now you want to go to this specific file location here on your main drive. So under your user, you want to go to the app data folder. By default, there are certain folders on your computer that Windows will not show. So make sure that you make them visible through Windows. If you don't know how to do that, it's a simple Google search away. And then under app data, you want to go to roaming and then chat PS4. In here, we can find a folder called sys modules, which will usually be empty. And this is where you want to drop your sys module files into that you got from your PlayStation 4, ideally. I cannot share these for obvious reasons, but if you got your hands on them, this is where you want to drop them. And now you are set to go. Now you can actually start the game. It should boot as normal, and you're pretty much good to go. If you previously installed the title update, you actually already have the DLC. You just need to enable them. And the way you do this is by joining the Driveclub modding server, because in there you can find the Driveclub mega fix. This is under the releases tab down here in the middle. You just click that and then the Driveclub mega fix will be available right here. I would also highly encourage you to stay on the server, because they are actually cooking up some custom events and potentially even custom cars for Driveclub, which is insane. But for the sake of the tutorial, we're gonna just use this for now. Now from the Driveclub Mega Fix archive, you want to just go in here until you see these 3 folders. And what you want to do is you want to go to your games folder and then the games folder, Driveclub's folder that was previously created. You want to open this and then just drag these 3 folders into the games folder. Now I've already done this, so it's asking me to overwrite, but it should just like add these 3 extra separate folders. And with that you're done. Now you actually have access to all of the DLC and the online content without actually having to unlock anything. If you own lossless frame generation, you can use it just like usual. You don't need to do anything else. You can just leave the stock settings here. Just hit the scale button and then go into the game, or use the key combination that you've set up, which in my case is Ctrl Alt and S. And that way you can get up to 240 FPS if you want to. I would recommend not going over twice the frame rate, because at that point you're gonna start to see very, very diminishing returns. And likewise, you can hook reshade onto this. Just download the reshade installer, point it to the game. Make sure to select the Vulkan renderer. And the shaders that I used are the immersive shaders, because they come with a sharpening filter and an anti-aliasing filter that I think looks the best. And then once in the game, press the home button, or if you're on a German keyboard like I am, position 1 to bring up the menu, and then just take the sharpening and anti-aliasing filter. And with that, you're good to go, and you can play the game just like I did in this video. And yeah, that's about it. I gotta be honest, I did not expect to be playing Driveclub on PC this year at all in any capacity, let alone this well. This is absolutely incredible, and I cannot wait to see where PS4 emulation goes from here. 2 other PlayStation 4 exclusive games that I would really, really love to see playable at some point is first of all the Wipeout Omega Collection, which I think could absolutely rock on this emulator. And also GT Sport, because I think GT Sport could also benefit from, first of all, higher frame rates, but also has a honestly pretty fun single-player campaign that I kind of miss. Those are definitely 2 games that I would still like to see be playable on the PS4 emulator, but as of right now, Driveclub is really the only racing game you can properly play on this. But yeah, let me know if you will also play this game on an emulator for the first time now that it's pretty much as good as playable. Let me know how it runs for you. Let me know if you had any issues. I'll try to reply to as many questions to the install process as I can. So if you ran into any issues, just check the comments. Maybe your question was already answered at some point. And yeah, that about covers it. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate it. And until next time, take care, take it easy. And as always, peace. See you guys.